Rain fell the morning she buried him. Not the gentle kind, but hard, stinging drops that turned the red dirt to mud. The preacher spoke soft, his words whisked away by the wind, but she barely heard. She just saw the hole in the ground, the coffin inside, and the way her own hands shook as she dropped in the last handful of earth. Her name was Eliza Carr. 29 years old, already a widow. Her husband, Thomas, had been shot down on the trail west of town, ambushed for the coins in his saddlebag. The sheriff said it was bandits. She knew better. She saw the way some men in town avoided her eyes, the way others smirked when she walked past in her black dress. By sundown, the graveyard was empty but for her. She sat beside the fresh mound until the lanterns in town went out one by one. The crickets sang. Coyotes howled far off. Her body ached with exhaustion, but she couldn't leave. To leave meant to accept he was gone. The next morning she walked into town, her skirts dragging mud, her face pale. The streets were quiet, dust swirling between shuttered shops. A few eyes peeked out from windows, then vanished. At the Mercantile, whispers clung to her back like thorns. Bad luck, someone muttered. Every man near her dies. Another voice snickered. Maybe she wanted him gone. Eliza kept her head down. Her hands trembled as she bought flour and coffee. She spoke no more than a whisper to the shopkeeper. When she stepped outside, the sun burned hot on her face, but she still felt cold. Days turned into weeks. The black dress became her second skin. She hardly ate, hardly spoke. Nights were the worst. She sat by the window with a lamp staring at the horizon, waiting, listening. The prairie was never silent. It breathed with wind and insects, with the distant rumble of hooves. Every sound felt like a threat. Every shadow looked like a man with a gun. Sometimes she dreamed Thomas came back. She heard the jingle of his spurs at the door, the creak of his boots across the floorboards. She would rise, heart pounding, only to find emptiness. The chair by the fire stayed empty. The bed stayed cold. Then came the gossip. At church, women sat stiff beside their husbands, whispering behind gloved hands. Children stared at her black veil until their mothers yanked them away. One Sunday, the preacher spoke of temptation in the form of sorrow, and looked straight at her. She wanted to scream, to claw at their smug faces. But she only lowered her head. Still, there were nights when rage kept her awake. She thought of the men who killed Thomas. She thought of their laughter echoing across the canyon as he bled in the dirt. She pictured herself standing over them with a pistol in her hand. She hated herself for wanting it so badly. One evening, a storm rolled in. The sky turned black. Thunder rattled the windows, lightning tore across the plains. Eliza lit a single candle and sat at the table, her breath shallow. In the silence between thunderclaps, she swore she heard boots crunching on her porch. Her heart stopped. She held her breath, listening. The storm raged, rain hammering the roof, but she knew what she heard. Boots, slow, deliberate. A man standing just beyond her door. She blew out the candle. The room fell into darkness. She pressed her back against the wall, hands trembling. Her mind screamed for Thomas, but only her ragged breath answered. The steps stopped. Silence. Then the faint creak of the porch boards under weight. Whoever it was, he hadn't moved on. He was waiting. The storm cracked open the night again. For a flash, she saw the shadow through the window glass. Tall, broad shoulders. A hat pulled low. Her nails dug into her palms. Fear twisted with something else. An ache. A hollow loneliness that begged for the sound of a voice, any voice, even if it belonged to the devil himself. The boards groaned once more. And then, nothing. Just the storm. Just her own heartbeat hammering in her ears. When morning came, the porch was empty. The mud showed footprints half-washed by rain. She traced them with her eyes. Big prints. A man's prints. They led up to her door, then turned back toward the road. Eliza sank onto the step, her dress soaking in the damp wood. She didn't know if she felt relief or disappointment. Someone had come. Someone had stood inches away from her, watching. She lifted her face to the sky. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed and raw. But inside her, a storm still churned. The widow in black had been noticed. And soon, she would learn that some footsteps don't walk away forever. The second time the boots came, there was no storm to hide them. Just a quiet night. The prairie air still and heavy, the cicadas buzzing low. Eliza sat by the fire, mending a torn hem on her black dress when the sound reached her. The slow scrape of leather against wood, Her needle froze. The thread hung loose. She raised her head, listening. 3 steps, a pause, then another. Someone stood just beyond the door, breathing the same night air, waiting. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She reached for the shotgun propped against the wall. The metal was cold against her palms. She cocked it, the click echoing sharp in the silence. "Who's there?" Her voice cracked. No answer. The fire snapped behind her. Wind brushed the shutters. But from the porch, only silence. She rose slowly, shotgun steady. Her bare feet whispered across the floorboards. She pressed her back to the wall beside the door. "I'll shoot," she whispered. A long pause. Then finally a voice. Low, rough, worn from dust and whiskey. "I ain't here to harm you." The words curled through the air like smoke. Eliza's grip tightened. "Then say your name." Another pause. She could almost hear his jaw clench. "Call me Jonah." The name meant nothing. No man in town bore it. Yet something in his voice, something tired, broken, sent a strange shiver through her chest. She swallowed. "What do you want?" A breath. Then, "To make amends." Her blood went cold. The door stayed shut between them, but the words clawed into her heart. Amends. For Thomas? For the grave under the cottonwoods? Her knees weakened, but she forced steel into her voice. "Leave, or I'll put this shot through you." Silence, then the slow scrape of boots stepping back. She strained to hear him descend the steps. The night swallowed him whole. Eliza stood frozen until dawn painted the windows pale. When she opened the door, the porch was empty. The dust held no footprints, as if he'd been a ghost. But ghosts didn't speak. Days bled into nights. She couldn't shake the voice from her head. Jonah. It lingered when she tried to sleep, rode beside her when she walked to the well, whispered through the clatter of dishes. She stopped going into town. The stares, the whispers. They were easier to endure than the thought of seeing him again. Yet every evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, she found herself listening for boots. One night, they returned. This time, she didn't move. She stayed in her chair by the fire, shotgun across her knees. The boots stopped at her door, waited. The voice came again, softer now. "I knew your husband." Her breath hitched. Liar. It's the truth. Her throat closed. She wanted to scream, to curse him, to drive him off. But instead, she whispered, "Say his name, Thomas Carr." The sound of it in another man's mouth ripped through her. She pressed a hand to her chest as if to keep her heart from breaking free. "How?" she choked. "How did you know him?" A pause. "Then I rode with him once. Long ago, before—" His voice broke. "Before I chose the wrong trail." Her eyes stung. She hated him for speaking Thomas's name, hated herself for wanting to hear more. "Why are you here?" She whispered another silence. Then the words that would brand her soul. "Because the men who killed him were once my brothers." Her stomach lurched. The room spun. She gripped the shotgun, but her arms trembled. "You," her voice cracked. "You were with them?" "No," his answer came sharp, desperate. "Not that night. But I should have been. I should have stopped it. Instead, I left them. I left him. And he died." Eliza's vision blurred. Her body burned with rage, grief, confusion. She wanted to fling the door open, to see his face, to watch his eyes when she pulled the trigger. But her feet stayed rooted. Jonah's voice dropped lower, almost breaking. "I came to tell you. To answer for it. Do what you must." The air between them hung heavy. The fire crackled. The cicadas sang their endless song. Eliza closed her eyes. She pictured Thomas, his smile, the way his hand felt in hers. She pictured his body in the dirt, the grave she tended every day. Her finger brushed the trigger. Just one pull and this Jonah would fall. One less ghost to haunt her. But her hand froze. The voice outside carried no threat, no laughter, no cruelty. Only the hollow weight of guilt. At last she whispered, "Go." The porch boards creaked. The boots stepped back, then faded into the night once more. She lowered the shotgun, her whole body trembling. Jonah. The name clung to her lips like a wound. The saloon was louder than the church, louder than the marketplace, louder than grief itself. A place where men drowned memory in whiskey and let their tongues loosen in smoke. And it was here, beneath the swinging doors and yellow lamplight, that Eliza's name became sharper than a knife. She did not go there herself. Her black veil never crossed its threshold, but she heard what was said inside. Everyone in town did. A widow's reputation traveled faster than a bullet. She cursed him dead. One man spat between cards. Or maybe she wanted the gold for herself. Another sneered. Laughter burst, sharp and mean, rising above the piano. Eliza could almost hear it from her porch, the sound carried by prairie wind. Every insult stuck to her skin like burrs, each whisper cutting deeper than the last. But not all whispers were the same. One night, when the room was thick with smoke, another voice cut through, calm, low, steady. "Shut your mouth." The room hushed. Chairs scraped. Men glanced at one another, unsure. The speaker was Jonah, the drifter with shadows in his eyes, the one who stood nights outside her door. He leaned on the bar, whiskey in hand, watching them. "You think it's sport to spit on grief?" he asked, his voice rough. "Say another word about her and you'll answer to me." The men bristled. But no one moved. Jonah's stare was too cold, too certain. The kind of stare that belonged to a man who'd already killed and carried the weight of it. The whispers turned to mutters, then to silence. Cards slapped back onto the table. The piano resumed, cautious at first, then louder. From the upstairs balcony, the saloon girls watched with painted faces, their smiles fading. They knew danger when they saw it. Jonah drained his glass, set it down with finality, and walked out. His boots echoed against the wooden floor until the doors creaked shut behind him. By morning, word had spread. The widow Carr had a defender. Eliza heard it from the storekeep's wife, from the preacher's daughter, from the whispers of children who weren't supposed to know. Each telling carried the same mix of shock and suspicion. She burned with shame. Jonah's name tangled with hers now, knotted by gossip. Women whispered she invited him to her porch. Men said she was keeping his bed warm. The lies grew faster than wildfire, each one sparking another. And yet, when she lay awake at night, staring into darkness, she couldn't silence the memory of his voice. The way he had spoken in that saloon, fierce and steady when no one else would. Part of her wanted to hate him for it, to hate him for pulling her name deeper into the mud. But another part, a smaller, quieter, aching part, longed to hear him speak again. It came sooner than she wished. 3 nights later, the boots returned. She sat by the window, waiting this time. The lamp burned low. The air was cool, filled with the faint cry of owls. The steps stopped at her door. "Why?" she asked through the wood. Her voice cracked, heavy with sleeplessness. "Why do you keep coming back?" A pause. "Then because they'll kill me if I stay gone." Her heart stumbled. She stood, trembling. "What do you mean?" "They know I left them. They know I betrayed them. And they know I came here." The words sank into her bones like frost. She clutched the edge of the windowsill to steady herself. "Why me?" she whispered. Jonah's voice lowered, rough with guilt. "Because I owe him. Because I saw the way you buried him, and I couldn't leave you to carry it alone." Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he had no right to stand on her porch, no right to speak of Thomas, no right to bring her name into every drunken mouth in town. Instead, she whispered, "They'll never forgive you." "I don't want forgiveness," he said. "I want to make it right." The silence that followed pressed hard against the night. Eliza pressed her forehead against the cool glass. She could see the shape of him through the flicker of lamplight. A shadow, tall and unmoving, hat brim low. Her chest ached with something she couldn't name. Grief, rage, loneliness, hope, all tangled together until it hurt to breathe. At last, she whispered, "Go," for a long moment. He didn't move. Then the boards creaked, and the boots faded once again into the dark. But the saloon whispers did not fade. They grew louder, crueler, painting her as a woman already lost to sin. The preacher's wife refused her handshake. Mothers pulled children from her path. The black veil became not a symbol of mourning, but of suspicion. And still, when the night came, she found herself listening for the boots. The canyon swallowed sound. Every whisper, every hoofbeat, every scrape of leather seemed louder in the dark walls of stone. The moon hung thin above, casting pale light across jagged rock. Eliza followed Jonah's horse down the narrow path, her shawl pulled tight against the night wind. She had not meant to come. She had sworn she would never follow him, never let his shadow lead hers. But when he came to her porch that evening, voice low, saying, "If you want the truth, ride with me," something in her broke. She saddled the old mare and followed. The air smelled of dust and sage. Crickets chirped, coyotes called far off. Every step into the canyon felt like a step away from the world she knew. Jonah dismounted first. His boots crunched gravel. He tied the reins to a dead branch, then waited, his eyes glinting under the brim of his hat. Eliza slid from her saddle, her hands shaking. "Why here?" she whispered. "Because no one listens but the stones," he said. His voice was calm, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. He led her deeper into the gorge where shadows clung thick and cold. The canyon walls pressed close as if eager to hear confession. "They were my brothers," Jonah said at last. "Men I rode with for near 10 years. We robbed, we fought, we bled. I thought it was loyalty. I thought it was family." Eliza's stomach turned. She hugged herself tight. "But Thomas," Jonah's voice faltered. He stopped, hands flexing as if grasping ghosts. "He crossed our path one day. Just a trader with a wagon, heading west. He offered us water, even food. Treated us like men, not beasts. Should have ended there." Her throat closed. She already knew the rest, but hearing it made her chest burn. "They turned on him," Jonah said. "They saw the gold in his pack. Saw the way you'd stitched his shirt, saw his ring. They laughed about it, said it was easy pickings." He broke off, his voice sharp with shame. "I told them no, I left. I thought if I wasn't there, it wouldn't happen. But it did. 'Cause I wasn't there, it did." Eliza's nails dug into her palms. She wanted to strike him, to scream that leaving was no better than killing. But her voice came out small. "Why tell me this?" Jonah turned to her then, his face bare in the moonlight. She saw the lines of regret etched deep, the scars of a man who had lived too long with ghosts. "Because they won't stop," he said. "They know I walked away. They'll hunt me, and when they find me, they'll burn this town to ash. You'll be the first they break." The canyon wind sighed, carrying dust across her boots. She shook her head, heart pounding. "You should have died with him." He flinched, but did not argue. "Maybe I should have. But I didn't, so now I aim to set it right." Eliza's breath trembled. She stared at him, hating him, needing him. "How?" He stepped closer. The moon caught the edge of his jaw, the shadow under his eyes. "By killing them before they come for you." Her stomach twisted. The words tasted like sin, like fire, like temptation. "They'll come through this canyon," Jonah said. "They always ride through here. It's the only trail west. We set an ambush, you and me. We end it before it spreads." She felt the ground tilt beneath her. Her hands shook at the thought. Blood on her palms, death in her name. The silence stretched. The canyon leaned closer, listening. Finally, Eliza whispered, "If you do this, you'll damn us both." Jonah's voice was low, steady. "We're already damned." The night pressed around them, heavy as stone. Eliza closed her eyes. She saw Thomas's face. She saw the grave. She saw the townsfolk's eyes, sharp with judgment. She saw her own reflection, hollow and tired. And she saw Jonah standing there with his shame and his fury, offering her vengeance like it was salvation. When she opened her eyes, the canyon seemed darker. The wind howled low like a warning. Her voice trembled, but it carried. "Then do it," Jonah's jaw tightened. "Say it plain." Her heart cracked as the words left her. "If you love me, kill them all." The echo of her voice carried up the canyon walls, fading into the night. Jonah's eyes closed. For a long time he said nothing. Then he nodded, slow and heavy. So be it. The canyon swallowed the vow. Somewhere in the dark, an owl cried. And Eliza felt the last piece of her soul slip into the shadows. Thunder broke the night before dawn. A single long crack that woke the canyon like a judge's gavel. Men shifted beneath blankets. Horses stamped. And Jonah felt his stomach hollow with a cold that was not the wind. He moved without a sound, fingers finding leather, eyes tracing moonlit shapes. Eliza sat up beside him, her breath a white thread in the cold. They had dug shallow pits for the guns, tied ropes and stacked rocks as crude barricades. This was not a war. It was a promise. The dawn bled like an old wound, thin light crawling over stone. A hush settled, heavy and pulled taut. From the ridge, Jonah saw a smear. 3 riders, then more, shapes loose and angry, moving slow as vultures. He counted hearts instead of men, each one a tremor in his ribs. Eliza watched with a stillness that was harder than any armor. Her fingers gripped a pistol until the knuckles shone white. She smelled smoke and iron and something else. The metallic sweet of fear. They had no plan for mercy. Mercy belonged to preachers and men who'd never seen blood in a friend's mouth. Jonah's mind was a ledger of wrongs. Eliza's a ledger of loss. The canyon narrowed and the riders funneled like water. The lead man wore a coat the color of midnight, and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Jonah felt bile rise and tasted it. He breathed in slow, cataloging names he must remove from the world. The first shot came from a throat, not a gun. A whispered curse that loosened the taut string of fate. Then a rifle barked, a sound too loud for the canyon to swallow. Rocks spat dust. Horses reared. Men shouted. The world shrank to barrels and iron. Jonah fired into the man with the midnight coat, felt the recoil tear through bone and flesh, and heard a sound that was almost like a child crying. Eliza fired twice, hands sure, but the second shot went wide and the taste of regret was immediate. They fought like people who had nothing left to lose. Men fell on either side like old weeds. Jonah moved from rock to rock, each step a prayer, each breath a promise to Thomas. Eliza felt the prairie beneath her boots turn slick with red. She saw a man she'd once known as a neighbor slump, eyes wide with disbelief. The saloon lies felt distant, petty as a child's quarrel. This was real. This was blood and the hollow ache after it that no preacher's sermon patched. A rider tried to flank them, sliding down a narrow chute of stone. Jonah saw him, swore, and threw himself into the path. The man's horse stumbled. The rider tumbled. They rolled together, two bodies tangled, and Jonah felt life leave him in bright, sharp bursts. He pressed the pistol to a temple and did the thing he'd promised he wouldn't. He killed a brother. The canyon answered with a silence so vast it felt like doom. Eliza saw Jonah fall and felt a sound rip through her that she had no name for. She ran, boots slipping on blood-slick stone. Someone grabbed her arm, thin, desperate hands, and she turned to find a boy she'd fed once, someone who'd admired Thomas for his kindness. He screamed like a broken thing as a bullet tore through him. Eliza caught his falling body and smelled the dust and the iron, and the bitter tang of a life extinguished too soon. She pressed his head against her chest and sobbed into the leather of his coat. Jonah, blood on his hands and on his mouth, crawled to her. He laughed once, a little, awful sound that might have been a prayer. "You safe?" he asked, voice gone thin. Eliza shook her head, not from cold but from a thing deeper. She had not felt safe in a long time, not since the day Thomas's blood soaked the trail. Now safety had been traded for a kind of survival that tasted of ash. She pressed her forehead to Jonah's and felt the tremor of life. Neither of them could say what surrender would look like. By mid-morning, the canyon lay cluttered with bodies and horses and broken dreams. Crows arrived as if summoned, black against the pale sky. Townsfolk came later, faces white and mouths moving prayers they did not mean. The preacher covered his eyes when he saw what Eliza did, but she could not stop. She walked the line of fallen men and placed a hand on each forehead. Some had eyes open, seeing strange things in the dust. Others were empty as stones. She spoke their names aloud, a litany of grief, and when she spoke Thomas's name, she nearly fell. When the last rider's cry faded, Eliza and Jonah stood alone among ruins. Their hands were raw from clenching. Jonah looked at his palms, at the dark that filled the creases, and said nothing. Eliza felt a hollow open where some part of her used to be. Anger, perhaps, or a life of small domestic certainties. The town would call them monsters. The law would call them outlaws. Inside her, Thomas's voice answered with silence. Jonah took one step toward the path that led back and then paused. He turned to her, his eyes wet in the pale light. "You wanted them dead," he said, not accusing, more a statement. Eliza could not argue. She thought of the grave and the way the soil sank underfoot. She thought of sermons and of children who would call her a witch. She thought of Thomas's laugh, small and soft, and of the nights they had promised tiny, ridiculous things. "I did," she admitted. The single word was thin but true and tasted like iron. Jonah nodded once, a sound like a man accepting a sentence. Around them, vultures circled and the sun climbed, indifferent and cruel. They rode back together in a silence that was not peace. Word would spread as it always did. People would either praise or vilify, but neither could touch the hollow that sat in their chests. Eliza held Thomas's ring in her palm all the way home, feeling its cold edge. At the gate, the town watched like a jury. Eyes narrowed, whispers gathered steam. The preacher crossed himself and did not come near. The preacher's wife spit on the ground. Jonah tipped his hat and did not meet anyone's gaze. Eliza walked past with the small, terrible weight of someone who had paid the price. The town smelled of smoke and judgment. Windows shut when Eliza passed, shutters drawn like eyelids against sin. Children stopped their play to stare until mothers yanked them inside. The air itself seemed thinner, as though every breath came at a cost. She walked in silence, Thomas's ring heavy in her pocket, Jonah's shadow always just behind. They had survived the canyon, but survival was no gift. It was a curse. Every face reminded her of what had been done and of who she had become. At night, she tended Thomas's grave. She laid wildflowers where grass refused to grow. She whispered apologies that made her throat raw. Jonah waited a few paces away, hat in his hands, eyes lowered as if he dared not meet the dead man's gaze. The town did not forgive. Whispers grew sharper. Men spat in the dust as Jonah walked by. The preacher spoke of Sodom, of women who brought ruin upon their houses. He never spoke Eliza's name, but every gaze in the pews burned against her back. One evening, as dusk painted the sky with bruised light, Jonah spoke. His voice was low, careful. "They'll come for us. You know that," she turned, shawl clutched tight. "The law?" He nodded, or worse. "Men who want to make a name by gunning me down. Men who want to take you as payment for what we did." Eliza's breath trembled. The weight of it pressed heavy, yet no part of her was surprised. "Then what do we do?" Jonah's face was hollow with exhaustion. He looked older than his years. "We leave. Tonight. Ride until the prairie swallows us whole." Eliza stared past him toward the cottonwoods where Thomas lay. The thought of leaving his grave tore at her chest. But staying meant the noose. Staying meant shame that would stretch for decades. "I can't," she whispered. Jonah stepped closer. "Then I'll stay. Whatever comes, I'll stand in front of it." Her eyes burned. She wanted to hate him for the ruin, for the blood, for the whispers. Yet beneath it, something else twisted. A need too raw to name. "Why?" she asked. He swallowed. His voice was almost gone. "Because I love you." The words struck harder than any bullet. She closed her eyes, tears slipping free. She should have screamed, should have told him he had no right. But her lips betrayed her with silence. The days that followed passed like stolen hours. They lived between dread and longing. Jonah fixed the roof where rain seeped in. Eliza cooked bread she could barely eat. They spoke little, but every glance carried weight. Each brush of his hand near hers felt dangerous, sinful, and desperately alive. But the town's anger grew. A brick shattered her window one night. The next morning, someone painted "Widow of Death" across her door in dripping black tar. Jonah scraped it clean, jaw clenched, eyes murderous. "They'll never let us be," he muttered. Eliza placed her hand over his, stopping him. "Promise me something," she said. He looked up, waiting. "When they come, and they will, you don't fight for me. Not for this town. Not for redemption. You fight only if your heart demands it. And when you're done, you run." "Don't look back," Jonah's throat worked. He shook his head. "I can't leave you." "You must," she whispered. "Someone has to carry the story, even if it's twisted. Let them call me cursed. Let them damn my name. But you—" her voice broke. "You live." The silence between them felt endless. Then Jonah leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. His breath trembled as he spoke. "If I live, it'll be with your ghost beside me." Her tears wet his shirt. "Then carry me well." The night they came was moonless. Lanterns flickered through the dark, voices rising. Men with rifles, the sheriff among them, boots scuffed dirt, a mob smelling of whiskey and fear. Jonah loaded his gun with steady hands. Eliza stood beside him, heart pounding but face calm. The sound of boots grew louder, a storm of anger. "Stay inside," Jonah said. Eliza touched his arm. "Remember the promise." He gave one last look, full of love, sorrow, defiance, and stepped out into the night. The shouts rose. A gun cocked, silence stretched, brittle and unbearable. Then the first shot cracked, and the world became fire. Eliza pressed her back against the wall, eyes shut, whispering a prayer that felt more like surrender. She heard Jonah's voice once, loud over the chaos. "You'll not touch her." Then gunfire drowned it. When it ended, dawn was spilling pale across the horizon. The street lay littered with smoke and blood. Jonah stood in the center, swaying, pistol empty. His shirt was dark with wounds. Eliza rushed to him, catching him as his knees buckled. His breath was ragged, his eyes already dimming. "You kept the promise," she whispered, cradling his head. His lips curved faintly, a shadow of a smile. "I told you. I'd carry you." And with that, his body went slack in her arms. The town watched in silence. No one moved. No one dared speak. Eliza pressed her lips to his temple, her tears mixing with the blood. "I'll carry you too," she whispered. She buried him beside Thomas under the cottonwoods, the earth damp with her grief. Two men, one grave apart, both bound to her by love and death. The whispers did not stop. They never would. But sometimes when the wind swept across the prairie, Eliza swore she heard boots in the dust, a voice low and rough, carrying the echo of the last promise, and she carried it with her into every dawn.